27 years ago, an entire class of young students vanished during a school trip. They disappeared without a trace, leaving their families heartbroken. Authorities suspected the male teacher who had gone missing with them, but with no bodies found and no strong leads, the investigation eventually went cold. Yet, through all these years, one mother never gave up hope. She clung to the small chance that her daughter might still be out there somewhere. Then one day, while looking through old photographs, she noticed something that everyone else had missed. A tiny detail that would change everything and shake the case in ways no one could have imagined. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoy mystery stories, don't forget to subscribe. Laura Calloway woke up on the morning of September 28, 2023, with a heavy heart. The grey, cloudy sky outside matched her mood. She had prepared herself for this day, but the pain still felt fresh. It had been exactly 27 years since her daughter, Rory, had disappeared. Slowly, Laura got out of bed and walked to her dressing table. Hanging on the mirror was a close-up photo of Rory in her school uniform. Laura picked it up gently, her eyes filling with tears, as she stared at her daughter's bright, smiling face. "Oh, Rory," she whispered, her voice trembling. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay strong. She had survived the worst over the past 27 years, and she knew she couldn't let herself break now. After washing her face and getting dressed, Laura checked her phone. There was a message from her best friend, Helen Carter. "You're not alone in this. We all remember. If you need company, come over anytime." Helen was also the mother of one of the missing children. Knowing that someone else shared her pain gave Laura a small comfort. She quickly replied, asking if she could come over now. Helen's response was immediate and warm. Before leaving, Laura went to the kitchen and grabbed a few packets of Earl Grey lavender tea and a jar of homemade cookies. Showing up empty-handed at a friend's house never felt right to her, even after all these years. Memories flooded her mind as she stepped outside and began the short walk to Helen's house. The loneliness, the endless nights of grief, the desperate hope that had never truly left her heart. Little did she know that today would bring a discovery that would change everything. Since losing her husband, Helen had been one of the few people who truly understood Laura's pain. She had stood by her through the darkest moments, offering comfort when no one else could. The neighborhood was quiet as Laura walked down the familiar streets. The houses looked almost the same as they had 27 years ago, a sharp contrast to how much her own life had changed. As she neared Helen's house, just a few blocks from her own, the front door opened before she even had a chance to knock. Helen greeted her with a warm, understanding smile and pulled her into a comforting hug. "Come in," she said softly, guiding Laura inside. Laura handed her the jar of cookies and tea packets as they made their way to the kitchen. Helen started boiling water for the tea while Laura settled onto the living room sofa. The familiar surroundings of Helen's home brought her a small sense of peace on this difficult day. As they waited for the water to boil, Helen turned to Laura and gently asked, "How are you holding up?" Laura sighed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm trying," she admitted. "You know how it is, this day is always the hardest." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Even though I've learned to live with it, the past still lingers, especially today." Helen nodded, understanding. "It's the same for me," she said. "I finished my therapy last year, and I've tried to stop drowning in all the what-ifs, But no matter how much I accept the past, today still hurts." She hesitated. "I don't know if that means I need to go back to therapy." The kettle whistled, breaking the heavy silence. Helen poured the hot water into 2 cups and set them on the coffee table. The soothing scent of Earl Grey and lavender filled the air, offering them a brief moment of calm. As they sipped their tea, Laura felt grateful for Helen's presence. Over the years, they had supported each other when no one else truly understood their pain. The weight of their loss still lingered, but so did the quiet strength they had built together. Helen set down her cup and looked at Laura with a thoughtful smile. "You know, my psychologist once told me something that helped," she said. "We have to face our pain when it comes, accept it as a part of who we are, instead of running from it." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I was thinking, maybe we could look at some old photos together. Only if you're up for it." Laura took another sip of her tea, letting the warmth settle inside her. After a moment, she gave a small nod. "I think that might be good," she said softly. Helen stood up, walked over to the TV cabinet, and pulled out a photo album. Helen returned to the sofa and sat close to Laura, placing the album between them. As they flipped through the pages, memories came rushing back. The pictures showed moments from happier times, first days of school, birthday parties, family picnics. Laura and Helen found themselves smiling, their voices a mix of laughter and sorrow. "Do you remember when Rory and Sally first started at that school?" Laura asked, pointing to a picture of the 2 girls in their uniforms. Helen nodded with a wistful smile. "5th grade, wasn't it? The school had only been open for 2 years back then." "That's right," Laura said. "I remember how small the class was, at first just 6 students. But by the end of that year, it had grown to 15 inches. Helen chuckled. The school worked hard to attract parents, all those discounted fees and special programs. They continued flipping through the album when Laura's eyes suddenly landed on a picture she had never seen before. It showed Rory and Sally, along with some classmates, working on a science project at the school fair. Their faces glowed with excitement, unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. "This picture, it's beautiful," Laura whispered. "Where did you get it?" Helen glanced at the photo and sighed. "The police gave it to me a few months ago. Since the case went cold, they allowed parents to collect evidence files. I went to the station and requested everything they had." Laura looked at her in surprise. "I didn't know we could do that. If I had known, I would have asked for copies too." Helen gave a sad smile. "Maybe it's better that you didn't. Having all these files made it harder for me to move on. That's why I needed therapy. I spent so many sleepless nights going through those documents, hoping to find something, anything, that could give us answers." Laura nodded, understanding the weight of Helen's words. As they continued looking through the pictures, another unfamiliar image caught Laura's attention. It was a class photo, taken in front of a bright yellow school bus, the very bus that had taken the children on that fateful trip. She stared at it, her eyes scanning each face carefully. Then suddenly, she noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Laura stared at the photograph, her voice laced with confusion and a small flicker of hope. "Why is Principal Lillian Brooks in this picture? I thought Mr. Gregory, the classroom teacher, went alone with the kids, along with just one support staff that day." Helen leaned in, studying the image closely, her brow furrowed. "You know, I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "I remember some parents whispering that the staff member was the principal, but I never thought much of it." Laura couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping into her mind. For years, she had believed only the teacher and an assistant had gone on that trip. The presence of the principal in this photo raised questions she had never thought to ask before. She opened her mouth to speak, but Helen gently placed a hand on her arm. "Laura," she said softly, "I know that look in your eyes. We've been here before thinking we've found something big, something that could finally give us answers. But every time, it just leads to more pain. We can't keep holding on to false hope." Laura wanted to argue, to insist that this small detail did matter. But when she saw the worry in Helen's eyes, she hesitated. Taking a deep breath, she tried to push down the emotions threatening to rise. "You're right," she said finally, though doubt still nagged at her. "It's probably nothing." Helen gave her a sympathetic smile and glanced back at the photo album. "Look," she said, pointing to the bus in the background. "This picture was probably taken before the trip, on school grounds. That could explain why the principal was there." Laura nodded, but the uneasy feeling remained. She glanced at the clock on the wall and realized they had been talking for nearly an hour. "Helen, I hate to cut this short, but I should get going," she said, standing up. "I want to visit Rory's grave. Bring her some flowers, tidy up a bit. I do it every year, you know." Helen nodded in understanding. "Of course. Do you want some company? Sally's grave is in the same cemetery." Laura smiled at her friend's kindness, but noticed the hesitation in her voice. "That's sweet of you, but I know you prefer to go with Matthew later. I'll be all right." As she prepared to leave, Laura hesitated and turned back. "Helen, would it be okay if I took this photo with me? The one with the school bus?" Helen seemed to consider it for a moment before nodding. "Of course, but promise me, Laura, don't let this consume you again. We can't go back down that rabbit hole." Laura assured her she would be careful. But as she stepped outside and made her way toward the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something important. The image of Principal Lillian Brooks standing with the children before their ill-fated trip burned in her mind. A puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the story she had been told for the past 27 years. As she waited for the bus, the sky darkened, heavy clouds threatening rain, much like the storm of emotions brewing within her. She silently hoped the rain would hold off until she had finished her visit to the cemetery, just one peaceful moment to honor her daughter's memory. On the ride to town, Laura sat quietly, lost in thought. The photo trembled slightly in her hands as she studied it again, her mind racing with questions. Helen's words echoed in her head, warning her not to hold on to false hope. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the feeling deep in her gut. Why had some parents believed the principal went on the trip, while others, like herself, had been told it was just the teacher and a support staff? Laura had always been an involved parent attending meetings, keeping up with school activities, so how had she missed something this important? Laura stared at the photo, a strange unease creeping into her heart. "Why is Principal Lillian Brooks in this picture?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. "I thought Mr. Gregory and one support staff were the only ones who went on that trip." Helen leaned in, studying the image with a frown. "I don't know," she admitted. "I remember some parents saying the principal went too, but I never really thought about it." Laura felt a wave of doubt. All these years, she had believed only the teacher and an assistant had gone. If the principal had been there, why had she never heard about it before? She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She still had the police officer's number saved from years ago. Would he even remember her? Would he be willing to help? Taking a deep breath, She dialed. The first call went unanswered. She tried again, still nothing. Only the cold, empty sound of voicemail. Should she leave a message? "Hello, it's me. I need your help." It felt desperate, foolish even. Shaking her head, she put the phone back in her purse. As the bus slowed at a stop, Laura glanced out the window. Her breath caught. This was near the principal's house. A chill ran through her. She hadn't been here in years. Without thinking, she pressed the bell and stepped off the bus just before the doors closed. Standing on the sidewalk, doubt crept in. What was she doing? Did Principal Brooks even live here anymore? Still, she found herself walking down the street, searching for something familiar. Some houses looked newer, others aged with time. Then, after a few minutes, she spotted it. A neatly kept garden. A car in the driveway. She hesitated. What am I even going to say? Swallowing her nerves, she walked up to the porch and knocked. Silence. Just as she was about to turn away, two women approached the house. One was younger, in her mid-30s. The other, Laura's heart skipped a beat, was Principal Lillian Brooks. Even with the wrinkles and softened features, she recognized her instantly. The principal's expression was polite, but puzzled. "Can I help you?" Laura took a steadying breath. "I'm Laura Calloway," she said, watching for a reaction. For a moment, Principal Brooks froze. Her face paled, and she fumbled for words. "Oh, Mrs. Calloway, She glanced at the younger woman beside her, then quickly ushered her inside. "Go on in, dear. I'll be right there." Laura frowned. Who is she? The principal had no children. When Brooks returned, she seemed flustered. Wiping her hands on her blouse, she forced a small smile. "Forgive me, but your name sounds familiar. I can't quite place it." Laura's chest tightened. She met the woman's eyes and spoke clearly. "I'm Rory Calloway's mother," she said. "My daughter was in the 5th grade class of 1996. She disappeared during the school trip." All color drained from the principal's face. Laura noticed the way her hands trembled, the way her eyes darted toward the half-closed door, toward the woman inside. Why was she so nervous? The silence stretched between them before Brooks finally cleared her throat. "Mrs. Calloway," she said slowly, "I'm no longer the school principal. I retired years ago." She paused, then added, "Why are you here?" Laura hesitated, but decided to be direct. "I have a question about that trip," she said. "I'm sorry for showing up like this, but I was in the area, and it came to mind." The principal stole another glance at the door. Then, with visible reluctance, she nodded. "All right," she said, "but I can't stay long." "I have a guest waiting," Principal Brooks said, her voice polite but firm. Laura nodded, understanding the hint. But before she left, she reached into her purse and pulled out an old class photo. Holding it up, she asked, "Was this taken at the school or during the trip?" The principal narrowed her eyes, studying the picture carefully. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Her brows furrowed. "I think it was at the start of the trip," she murmured, then quickly corrected herself. "No, actually, it was taken in the school parking lot." Laura's heart skipped a beat. Why had she hesitated? She decided to push further. "Were you on the trip that day?" Principal Brooks's eyes widened slightly before she shook her head. "No, I stayed at the school. Mr. Gregory, the classroom teacher, and a staff member from the administration went instead. I was supposed to go, but I had an important last-minute matter to handle, so the admin staff took my place." Laura nodded slowly, processing the information. It matched what she had always been told, yet something still felt off. She hesitated, then asked one last question. Did you notice anything strange about Mr. Gregory that day? Anything at all? At this, the principal's entire demeanor changed. Her voice grew sharper. No, Mrs. Calloway. I've answered these questions for the police many times before. I never thought Mr. Gregory was capable of something like that. She sighed, her tone softening. I'd rather not talk about it anymore. It was painful for me too. I found my closure, and I don't want to reopen old wounds. Guilt crept into Laura's heart. That hadn't been her intention. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I understand. Truly. She swallowed, her throat tight. It's just, I still can't believe my daughter disappeared into thin air. To her surprise, tears welled in her eyes. She quickly pulled a tissue from her purse, dabbing at them before they could spill over. Through her blurred vision, she noticed the younger woman inside the house watching them. There was something in her gaze, a mix of curiosity and concern. Principal Brooks sighed and stepped forward, her expression softening. I understand your pain, Mrs. Calloway, she said gently. It's one of the reasons I retired early. As long as I worked at that school, I couldn't escape the grief. She hesitated before embracing Laura in a brief but comforting hug. I know today marks 27 years, she continued. You're not the first parent to come here on this day. Laura was taken aback by the sudden display of emotion. As they pulled apart, she slipped the photo back into her purse and managed a weak smile. Thank you for your time, she said. I should go now. I'm sorry for bothering you. As Laura turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The principal's hesitation. The presence of the younger woman. The small inconsistencies in her answers, yet maybe she was just overthinking it. Helen was right. She couldn't afford to fall into false hope again. Walking back to the bus stop, Laura's mind raced with thoughts. The heavy sky finally gave in, and raindrops began to fall, matching the weight in her chest. She reached the bus shelter, pulled out her phone, and stared at the screen. Should she call the police officer again? Would it make a difference? Before she could decide, the bus arrived. Laura stepped on and took a window seat, holding the old class photo tightly to her chest. Rain drummed against the glass, steady and rhythmic. She checked her phone again, hoping for a missed call, a message, anything, nothing. Her stop came into view, and she stepped off into the drizzle. Just down the street, the florist shop stood out with its bright display of flowers, a stark contrast to the gray, gloomy day. She hesitated under the awning of a nearby shop, waiting for the rain to ease. Should I call again? Would the officer even have anything new to say? With a quiet sigh, she slipped her phone back into her purse. Maybe Helen was right. Maybe she was chasing ghosts. But no matter how much she tried to silence her thoughts, one image wouldn't leave her mind. The young woman in Principal Brooks's house. Something about her felt important. Shaking off the thought, Laura took a deep breath and hurried toward the florist shop, using her purse as a makeshift umbrella. The cold rain seeped through her clothes, but she barely noticed. She just had to cross the street. Getting wet didn't matter. The moment she stepped inside, a warm, floral scent wrapped around her. The soft chime of the shop's bell greeted her, and a familiar voice followed. Mrs. Calloway, the florist said with a kind smile. I was wondering if we'd see you today. Laura forced a small smile. Hello, Sarah. Yes, she said softly. I'm here for my usual order. As Sarah gathered the flowers Laura always chose for Rory's grave, Laura's eyes wandered across the shop. The selection seemed smaller than in previous years, and disappointment flickered in her chest. Noticing her expression, Sarah sighed. I'm sorry, Laura. The weather's been unpredictable, and our suppliers didn't have as much this time. Laura nodded. It's all right, Sarah. I'm sure we can still make something beautiful for Rory." The bell above the door jingled, and Laura turned to see Helen and her husband Matthew stepping inside. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, surprise crossed Helen's face before shifting into concern. "Laura," Helen said as she approached, "I thought you would have come earlier. Is everything okay?" Laura hesitated. She wasn't sure how much to say about her unexpected visit to Principal Brooks's house. "I got a bit sidetracked," she said finally, "but it's good to see you both." Matthew gave her a warm handshake. "It's good to see you too. How are you holding up?" Before Laura could answer, Sarah returned, holding out the bouquet. "Here you go, Mrs. Calloway. Would you like to arrange them yourself, like always?" Laura nodded, relieved for the distraction. "Yes, thank you." As she carefully selected each flower, Helen and Matthew picked their bouquet for Sally's grave. The shop was quiet, except for the soft rustling of paper and their hushed voices. Laura's hands moved without thinking, arranging the flowers the way she had done so many times before. But her mind wasn't in the shop. It was back at Principal Brooks' house. Should she tell Helen about her visit? Would she understand? Or would she think Laura was just clinging to false hope again? As she tied a ribbon around the bouquet, she glanced up. Helen was watching her with gentle concern. "That's beautiful," Helen said softly. "Rory would have loved it." Laura swallowed the lump in her throat. The mention of her daughter's name made her chest tighten. "Thank you," she whispered. "I hope so." At the counter, as Sarah wrapped Helen's bouquet, Laura found herself studying her friend's face. There was grief there, deep and familiar, but also a quiet acceptance Laura wished she could feel. Suddenly, before she could stop herself, she spoke. "Helen," she said, her voice low, "there's something I need to tell you." Helen turned to her, curiosity mixed with concern. "What is it?" Laura took a deep breath. "After I left your house, I went to see Principal Brooks." Helen's eyes widened. "You did what? Why?" Before Laura could answer, Sarah handed them their flowers. "Here you are, ladies," she said kindly. "I hope these bring you some comfort today." Laura and Helen thanked her before stepping outside. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. Matthew glanced at them. "Should we go together?" he suggested. Laura hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." As they walked toward Matthew's car, Laura felt the weight of Helen's questioning stare. She knew she had to explain, but how could she say what was on her mind without sounding like she was chasing shadows? Inside the car, silence settled around them, like a thick fog. Helen turned in her seat, her expression a mix of worry and curiosity. "Laura," she said gently, "why did you go to see Principal Brooks? What were you hoping to find?" Laura took a deep breath, gripping her bouquet tightly. "I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that class photo," she admitted. Helen frowned. "The one with the school bus." "Yes, I asked her about it, and at first, she said it was taken at the start of the trip. But then she changed her answer, said it was before they left, in the parking lot." Laura shook her head. It felt like she was covering something up. Matthew glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His expression was calm. "Laura, it's been 27 years. Memories fade, people mix up details." "I know," Laura said, "but there was something else. When I got to her house, there was a young woman there, someone I've never seen before. And Principal Brooks. She looked nervous, like she didn't want her to hear what we were saying." Helen and Matthew exchanged a look Laura couldn't quite read. After a moment, Helen sighed. "Laura, I get it. I do. But we've been here before." Her voice was gentle, but firm. Remember 3 years ago, when you thought the bus driver was connected to that cold case in Oregon? Laura's face heated at the memory. She had been so sure she'd found a clue. She had spent weeks chasing it, only for it to lead nowhere. "This is different," she insisted. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Is it?" The car fell into silence as they drove through the quiet streets toward the cemetery. Laura gazed out the car window as the town faded into open fields. The rain had stopped, and patches of blue peeked through the clouds. As they neared the cemetery gates, the silence in the car stretched until Matthew finally spoke. "We care about you, Laura. We just don't want you to get hurt again," he said gently. Laura swallowed the lump in her throat. "I know," she whispered, "but I can't shake this feeling. Rory, Sally, and all the others, they deserve more than just being forgotten. They deserve the truth." Helen reached over and squeezed Laura's hand. "They do," she agreed. "But sometimes the truth is that we may never know everything, and we have to learn how to live with that." Matthew parked the car, and Laura felt a storm of emotions inside her: grief, hope, and now, something new: determination. Her friends meant well, but she couldn't ignore what had happened with Principal Brooks. It felt like a door had opened, one that had been locked for too long. Stepping out into the cool air, they walked through the damp grass. The scent of wet earth lingered around them. The cemetery was eerily quiet, except for the soft crunch of their footsteps. Rory and Sally's graves weren't side by side, but they were close. Laura and Helen had made sure of that, a small comfort in their shared loss. Laura knelt by Rory's tombstone, setting her flowers down carefully. The fresh petals stood out against the grey stone, adding a small touch of life. She traced the letters of her daughter's name with her fingers, memorizing them all over again. Her chest ached. This stone was supposed to bring peace, but it only reminded her of what was missing. There was no body beneath it, no real closure, just a place to visit, a place to grieve. With a quiet sigh, she reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. Rory's smiling face looked up at her. Laura brushed her fingers over the image, memories flooding back. Her daughter's laughter, the way she tugged at Laura's sleeve when she wanted attention. The last time she had kissed her goodbye. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't try to stop them. She let the sobs come freely, letting herself feel the pain all over again. When the weight of her sorrow became bearable, she wiped her tears and stood. She glanced at Helen and Matthew, who stood a few feet away by Sally's grave, lost in their mourning. Laura took a deep breath, ready to join them. But just as she stepped forward, something caught her eye. A woman stood near the graves of the other missing children. She wasn't just visiting, she was standing still, staring at a headstone, her hands clasped tightly. Laura's breath hitched. It was the same young woman she had seen at Principal Brooks's house. Her heart pounded. Was this just a coincidence? Or was there something more? Without thinking, Laura changed direction. She gently touched Helen's arm. "I'll be right back," she murmured before walking toward the woman. As she got closer, she noticed the woman was crying. Her shoulders shook as she stood in front of one of the graves. Laura hesitated, then spoke softly, "Excuse me." The woman turned quickly, her face full of surprise and fear. She wiped her tears away as if trying to hide them. Laura held her gaze. "We meet again," she said gently. "I think I saw you at Principal Brooks' house earlier." The woman's eyes flickered downward. She shifted on her feet, as though she wanted to run. Laura softened her voice. "I don't mean to intrude." The woman let out a quiet breath and shook her head. "It's okay," she murmured. "I come here every year on this day, to grieve." Laura nodded in understanding. "So do I," she said, "though I usually come in the morning." She glanced at her watch. 4 p.m., a strange feeling settled in her chest. Maybe this wasn't just a chance meeting. Maybe this woman was part of the answers Laura had been searching for. A heavy silence filled the space between them, thick with words left unsaid. Laura hesitated, then gently asked, "Who are you here for? Did you lose someone in the school tragedy 27 years ago?" The woman's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but then she pressed them together again. After a pause, she gave a slow, hesitant nod. Laura could sense her discomfort, so she didn't push for more. Instead, her eyes drifted to the tombstone. A small, framed photograph rested near the grave. The image had faded with time, the glass slightly smudged, but Laura could still make out the outline of a young girl's face. The woman noticed Laura looking and, in a quick movement, reached down, grabbed the photo, and clutched it tightly against her chest. "I'm sorry," Laura said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude." Their eyes met, and Laura saw something familiar in the woman's gaze: grief, love, and a deep, aching loss. "You must have loved her very much," Laura added gently. "I know how that feels." She took a small step back, ready to leave. She didn't want to cause the woman more pain, but just as Laura turned to go, the woman spoke. "Wait," she said, her voice uncertain but firm. Laura stopped and glanced back. Why did you go to Principal Lillian's house earlier?" The question took Laura by surprise. She turned fully, studying the woman's face. There was something behind her eyes, more than just curiosity. There was caution, maybe even fear. "I wanted to ask about the school trip," Laura admitted. "I needed to know if she was there when the children left, or if she went with them." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn, slightly crinkled photograph. "My friend Helen showed me this earlier," she said, gesturing toward Helen and Matthew, who were still standing by Sally's grave. "I had never seen it before. It confused me. I don't remember Principal Lillian being there that day." The woman took the picture, her grip tightening around her own framed photograph. She stared at the image for a long moment, taking in the faces of the children. Then, to Laura's surprise, a soft chuckle escaped her lips, a sound filled with sorrow. But as her eyes lingered on one face, her expression changed. Tears welled up, slipping down her cheeks. Then, in a hushed whisper, she said, "Rory was such an ass." Laura's heart clenched, not because the words were cruel, but because the way she said them was filled with warmth, like someone recalling an old friend with both fondness and pain. Laura's breath caught in her throat. You knew Rory?" she asked, her voice urgent. The woman stiffened, as if she hadn't meant to say it out loud. She quickly handed the class photo back, her hands trembling. Laura's pulse raced. "I'm Rory's mother," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady, though emotions swirled inside her. "Do you know something about her?" The woman froze. Her whole posture changed, turning defensive, as if Laura had just backed her into a corner. Laura felt a chill creep over her. Her eyes flicked toward the framed photograph the woman still held tightly against her chest. And that's when she saw it, the resemblance. The woman looked just like the girl in the picture. A shiver ran down Laura's spine. Her mouth went dry as she slowly asked, "Who are you?" She pointed at the photo, her heart pounding. "Are you this girl?" The woman's reaction was instant. "No!" she burst out, her voice sharp, almost panicked. But the fear in her eyes told a different story. Laura stepped closer, her voice soft. "It's okay," she said gently. "You don't have to be afraid. Are you one of the survivors?" The woman quickly shook her head. But Laura wasn't sure if she believed her. Fear flickered in the woman's eyes, but her quick denial only deepened Laura's suspicions. "I think you're mistaken. That's not me," the woman insisted, but Laura wasn't convinced. She could see the struggle behind her words. "No," Laura said gently but firmly. "It's you. I know it is." The woman's shoulders slumped, her face filled with defeat. "You don't want to know who I am," she whispered. "It's better that way, for everyone." Laura took a shaky breath, her heart pounding. "For 27 years, I've lived with unanswered questions about my daughter's disappearance. Every year, I come here to remember her, and for a while, I think I can survive the pain. But then, this day comes again, and it's like I'm trapped in an endless cycle of grief." Tears burned in her eyes as she stepped closer, desperation tightening in her chest. "If you know anything, please tell me." The woman's eyes filled with emotion, and for the first time, she looked ready to speak. "Why were you at Principal Lillian's house?" Laura asked, her voice steadier now. "I know she doesn't have a daughter. So, who are you?" The woman's breath caught. The cemetery felt eerily silent, as if even the trees were holding their breath. Then, after a long pause, she exhaled and whispered, "You're right. I was one of the missing students." Laura's body tensed. The air around her seemed to shift. "A survivor?" The woman looked down as if the weight of her own words was too much to bear. "My name was Audrey Whitman," Laura gasped. Recognition crashed over her like a wave. Audrey Whitman. The name etched into one of the tombstones, a reminder of the children lost that day. "You were in my daughter's class," Laura murmured, trying to process the impossible. Audrey nodded. Laura swallowed hard. "Does your family know you're alive?" Audrey shook her head, sadness clouding her face. "No. That's why I only come here in the afternoon. My parents always visit in the morning." Laura thought back to the times she had seen Audrey's parents at the cemetery, their eyes hollow with grief. "Why didn't you go home?" she asked gently. Audrey looked away. "I'm too broken," she whispered. "It's a long story." Laura's heart ached for her. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said. "But please go to the police. Give them your testimony. Your story could bring closure to so many families." Audrey's face twisted with conflict. She took a step back, shaking her head. "No. Principal Lillian told me it would only bring more pain." Laura's breath caught. "Lillian Brooks knew you were alive?" she asked in disbelief. Audrey nodded, her voice breaking. "I trusted her. She said she understood my pain." Laura clenched her fists, anger boiling inside her. "Your pain is real, Audrey," she said, her voice trembling. "But we're all in pain. The unknown is worse than the truth." Audrey's eyes searched Laura's face, looking for something. Maybe hope, maybe strength. Laura took her hand. "You could help us," she said softly. "You could help all the families who lost their children that day. Please, Audrey." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, with shaking hands, Audrey pulled out her phone. "I think you're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've wrestled with this for so long, but seeing you here, I'll call the police." As Audrey dialed, Laura's heart pounded. Desperation clawed at her throat as one final question burst from her lips. "Audrey, do you know where my daughter Rory is?" Audrey's expression darkened. Her gaze fell, heavy with sorrow. She nodded slowly. Laura's pulse raced. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Where is she?" Before Audrey could answer, Helen and Matthew hurried toward them. "Laura!" Helen called, her eyes scanning the scene. Who is this? Laura took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Helen, Matthew. This is Audrey Whitman. She was on the bus that day. Their eyes widened in shock. She's alive. Just as Audrey opened her mouth to speak, the distant sound of sirens cut through the quiet. The moment froze. Audrey flinched, her whole body tensing, as if her first instinct was to run. But Laura's voice broke through the fear. Audrey, she said softly, if you love Rory and Sally, if you want the truth to finally come out, you have to stay. Audrey's breath hitched. She looked between Laura, Helen, and Matthew, 3 people who had spent years searching for answers. Her lips parted. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Okay." Audrey took a shaky breath, her voice trembling, but firm. "I'll talk, but only at the station." Before anyone could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the cemetery. 2 police officers arrived, their presence making the moment feel even more intense. They stepped forward, their expressions serious. "Are you the one who called?" one officer asked. Audrey nodded. "Yes, my name is Audrey Calloway. I'm one of the missing children from 27 years ago." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of lost time. One officer exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking into his radio, requesting a background check on her name. While they waited, the other officer turned to Laura, Helen, and Matthew. "We need all of you to come to the station. We can't risk any disturbances here," he said firmly. Audrey took a deep breath and followed the officers to their squad car. Laura, Helen, and Matthew hurried to their vehicle, their minds spinning with everything that had just happened. Once inside, Laura couldn't hold back anymore. "You won't believe this," she said, her voice still shaking. She quickly recounted everything, the shocking truth about Audrey, the principal's knowledge of a survivor, and how it all felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Matthew frowned. "This doesn't make sense. Why would the principal keep something like that hidden?" Laura sighed. "I don't know, but whatever Audrey knows, it must be something huge, something dangerous." As they reached the police station, tension filled the air. Laura spotted Officer Jensen, the officer she had been trying to reach for days. He looked up from his desk and immediately walked over. "Sorry, I couldn't take your call earlier," he said. "I was handling an urgent case." Laura's frustration boiled over. "Officer, you need to listen to me. Audrey is a survivor. She's ready to tell her story." Jensen's eyes sharpened with focus. "If that's true, we'll reopen the case immediately." He gestured for Audrey to follow him into an interview room. Laura, Helen, and Matthew sat in the waiting area, their hearts pounding as the door closed behind her. Would this finally bring answers? Minutes turned into hours. Around them, the station buzzed with activity. Officers moved with urgency, their voices rising as they received new orders. Then, Laura overheard something that made her breath hitch. A unit was being sent to Principal Lillian's house with an arrest warrant. She exchanged a tense glance with Helen and Matthew. This was it. Audrey must have told them everything. Just then, the sharp wail of police sirens echoed outside. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Less than an hour later, the officers returned, leading a handcuffed Principal Lillian into the station. Her head was bowed, shoulders slumped, as if the weight of her secrets had finally crushed her. When she looked up, her eyes met Laura's. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but the officers didn't slow. They guided her toward booking, their grip firm and unwavering. Time dragged on. Laura, Helen, and Matthew sat in silence, their thoughts racing. The past, the present, and the long-buried truth were colliding all at once. Then an officer stepped into the waiting area. "It's time," he said. Their hearts pounded as they followed him into the interrogation room. Audrey sat inside, her face a mix of relief and fear. The air in the room felt heavy with everything that had just been revealed, and now, finally, the full truth was about to come out. A heavy silence hung in the air, but the fear in the woman's eyes only deepened Laura's suspicions. "You're mistaken. That's not me," the woman insisted quickly, but Laura saw the conflict in her gaze. "No," Laura said, her voice gentle yet firm. "It is you. I know it." The woman's shoulders slumped as if she had lost a battle. "You don't want to know who I am," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's better for everyone." Laura took a deep breath, her heart pounding. 27 years, she whispered, her voice breaking. "For 27 years, I have searched for answers about my daughter. I come here every year, trying to honor her memory, trying to move on. But when this day comes, it's like a cruel cycle, a never-ending torment." Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped closer, her heart aching for the truth. "If you know anything, please tell me." The woman's eyes flickered with emotion. It was as if a battle was raging inside her. "Why were you at Principal Lillian's house earlier?" Laura asked gently. "I know she doesn't have a daughter. So who are you?" The question lingered in the air, heavy, with unspoken truths. The woman's breath hitched, and for a moment, the world felt still. Then, after a long silence, she finally admitted in a whisper, "You're right. I was one of the missing students." Laura's heart pounded in disbelief. "What?" she gasped, struggling to process the weight of those words. The woman hesitated, then looked down at the ground, as if she was afraid to say more. "My name was Audrey Whitman." Laura's breath caught in her throat. Audrey Whitman. She had read that name on a gravestone for years, a haunting reminder of the tragedy. "You were in my daughter's class," Laura murmured, trying to keep her emotions in check. Audrey nodded. "Does your family know you're alive?" Audrey shook her head, pain etched across her face. "No. That's why I come to the grave later in the day. My parents always visit in the morning." Laura remembered seeing Audrey's parents at the cemetery, their faces frozen in grief. "Why didn't you go home?" she asked softly. Audrey closed her eyes, as if carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "I'm too broken," she whispered. "It's a long story." Laura's heart ached for her. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said gently. "But please go to the police. Your testimony could bring peace to so many families still searching for their children." Audrey stepped back, fear flashing in her eyes. "No," Principal Lillian said, "telling the truth would only make things worse." Laura felt a jolt of shock. "Lillian Brooks knew you were alive." Audrey nodded, her voice trembling. "I trusted her. She was the only one who understood my pain." Laura clenched her fists. "Audrey, we're all in pain, but not knowing the truth is worse than anything." Audrey's eyes searched Laura's face, hesitation flickering in her expression. Laura took her hand, her grip firm but comforting. "You can help us," she whispered. "Help all the families who lost their children. Please, Audrey." Silence stretched between them. Then, with shaking hands, Audrey pulled out her phone. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "I've struggled with this decision for so long, but seeing you here, I'll call the police." As Audrey dialed, Laura's heart pounded. A question burned on her tongue, and before she could stop herself, she asked, "Audrey, do you know where my daughter Rory is?" Audrey's face changed. Her gaze dropped to the ground. Sorrow clouded her eyes. Slowly, she nodded, Laura's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her pulse racing. "Where is she?" Before Audrey could answer, Helen and Matthew rushed toward them, their eyes scanning the scene in confusion. "Laura?" Helen asked, glancing between her friend and the stranger. "Who is this?" Laura took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Helen, Matthew, this is Audrey Whitman. She was on the bus that day." Their eyes widened in shock. "She's alive." At that moment, the distant wail of police sirens filled the air. Time seemed to freeze. Audrey flinched, her body tensing as if ready to run. But Laura's voice cut through the fear. "Audrey," she called out, "if you love Rory and Sally, if you want the truth to come out, then you need to stay." Audrey hesitated, torn between fear and the weight of the moment. She looked at Laura, Helen, and Matthew, the people who had been searching for answers for years. Her lips quivered. Then, after a long silence, she whispered, "Okay."